Right now, you might feel safe saving and investing in US dollars, but there's a quiet war going on that could wipe out the dollar's dominance overnight. Global trade has become a battlefield, and the weapon against the dollar is BRICS. And BRICS is gaining momentum and the power to shatter America's financial grip on the world. While most people will convince you that BRICS is no big deal, I'll break down why it is, and how exactly it's dismantling US power step by step, and also why this could trigger the biggest economic shock in American history. Please subscribe before I take you deep inside the reality. Part 1. Can BRICS actually kill the US dollar? So, BRICS is a group of major emerging economies such as Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa that work together on trade, finance, and politics. And now it's massively expanding to challenge US dominance in global trade and finance. But before I explain how BRICS is eventually going to kill the dollar, let me briefly tell you how the dollar became globally dominant in the first place, and how America became the richest country in history with the help of dollar dominance that was created on purpose. Right now, every country on the planet pretty much has to use US dollars when they buy oil, trade with other nations, or even store their national wealth. In other words, they have to hand over their real goods and services to get US dollars, and then use those same dollars to do business. Basically, this setup lets the US print as much money as it wants without feeling the heat. And while America is busy creating trillions of new dollars to cover its bills, other countries just soak them up, because they can't survive in global trade without those dollars. You might be thinking, how can the US actually pull that off? Well, it all comes down to something called the petrodollar deal from 1974. Basically, it was a handshake agreement between the US and Saudi Arabia. America promised military protection, and in return, Saudi Arabia agreed to sell oil only in US dollars, and then reinvest those dollars into US government bonds. This gave the US an exorbitant privilege, but not anymore, and that's exactly where BRICS comes in. Surprisingly, BRICS countries now represent 40% of the world's population and a third of global GDP. These countries are actively creating alternatives to the dollar. China and Russia trade in yuan and rubles. India buys Russian oil with rupees, and BRICS is developing its own payment system to bypass the US-controlled SWIFT network. So when major economies can trade without dollars, America's financial grip begins to loosen. And that grip is exactly what's allowed the US to rack up huge trade deficits year after year, because the rest of the world kept taking US dollars. So in short, the US can afford to have the world's biggest military, because other countries are basically footing the bill by buying US government bonds. While it can slap sanctions on nations and wreck their economies, because if you're cut off from the dollar system, you're pretty much cut off from global trade. But here's the catch. This whole setup only works if everyone keeps playing by America's rules. The moment big players decide they're done using dollars, the whole thing could fall apart. And that's exactly what BRICS is aiming for. Part 2. How BRICS changed everything. When BRICS was first coined in 2001 by economist Jim O'Neill at Goldman Sachs, it wasn't even a political or military alliance. The idea behind BRIC was simple. These countries were developing faster than the US, Europe, and Japan, so they could offer better investment returns over time. It was a financial concept, not an anti-US coalition. And for years, Western experts brushed it off as nothing more than a talk shop with no real influence. But BRICS evolved into a political and economic bloc later, especially after South Africa joined in 2010. Over time, it expanded, massively challenging Western-dominated institutions like the US dollar system, the IMF, and the World Bank. And in just the last 2 years, BRICS has jumped from 5 members to 10. Interestingly, the new members added in 2025 weren't random. They were picked to hit American interests exactly where it hurts the most. So, let's understand this first. Egypt controls the Suez Canal, one of the world's most important trade routes. Iran has massive oil reserves and has been building resistance to US sanctions for decades. The UAE is a major financial hub connecting East and West. Indonesia is the world's 4th most populous country with enormous natural resources. Ethiopia controls key shipping lanes in the Red Sea. Now these countries share a common enemy, the US, because every single one has been on the receiving end of US sanctions, military interventions, or economic pressure. They're not joining BRICS because they like each other. They're joining because they're tired of being controlled by America. On top of that, the July 2025 BRICS summit in Brazil was a declaration of war against dollar dominance. When Brazil's President Lula said he plans to talk with BRICS nations about how to respond to Trump's tariffs, after Trump called the group anti-American and warned of more tariffs to come. Also, Vietnam's Prime Minister met with China's Xi and agreed to boost trade ties. It demolished decades of American attempts to use Vietnam as a counterweight against China. When Cuba's president showed up despite 60 years of US sanctions, it proved that even America's most punished enemies are finding alternatives. The real jaw-dropper was Mexico showing up as an observer. Now, remember, Mexico isn't just some random country. It's America's biggest trading partner, and literally shares a border with the US. And when your closest neighbor and top trade partner starts looking for other options than the dollar, it's a huge red flag for your so-called monopoly. The numbers tell the real story. BRICS countries now represent 44% of global GDP and 56% of the world's population. They control the vast majority of global energy resources, most of the world's manufacturing capacity, and the largest consumer markets. Put that together, and they have everything they need to build a completely separate global economy, one that doesn't rely on American dollars at all. Even Trump understands how dangerous it's getting. He's been firing off threats about massive tariffs on BRICS countries and keeps insisting the group is dead. But honestly, the fact that he's talking about them this much just shows how nervous the US establishment is getting. But this is just the beginning of the end of the dollar. Part 3. The systematic destruction of dollar dominance. Now, BRICS is using a systematic approach to destroy dollar dominance. Their first major weapon is the New Development Bank, which is designed to replace the World Bank and IMF in developing countries. While the World Bank and IMF force countries to accept harsh American political demands for loans, the NDB offers financing without strings attached. Even better, they're increasingly making loans in local currencies instead of US dollars. Think about why this is devastating. When the World Bank lends money, countries have to earn dollars to pay back the loan, keeping them trapped in the American financial system. But when the NDB lends in Chinese yuan or Indian rupees, countries can pay back loans without ever touching a US dollar. They're building a parallel financial system that cuts America out entirely. Their second weapon is the Cross-Border Payments Initiative. Right now, if a company in Thailand wants to pay a supplier in Nigeria, that payment goes through American banks and gets processed in US dollars. BRICS is building payment systems that allow direct currency exchanges, cutting American financial institutions out completely. China and Russia have made incredible progress here, conducting hundreds of billions in trade without using American currency. Russian energy companies now accept Chinese yuan for oil and gas, and China pays for Russian resources using its own currency. This bilateral relationship alone represents more money than most countries' entire economies, and none flows through the US financial system. Their third weapon is massive gold accumulation. While American experts claim gold is obsolete, BRICS countries are buying it at record levels while reducing their holdings of US Treasury bonds. When major central banks dump dollars for gold, they're casting a vote of no confidence in America's financial future. And then comes the most dangerous weapon, which is digital currency initiatives. While the debate over whether to create a central bank digital currency continues, China has already launched the digital yuan and is using it for international trade. Russia, India, and Brazil are developing similar systems that could link together into a completely dollar-free digital payment network. Here, the United Arab Emirates has become crucial by serving as a financial bridge between BRICS and the rest of the world. They're facilitating trade settlements in Chinese yuan, accepting gold payments for oil, and helping other countries reduce dollar dependence without triggering immediate retaliation from Washington. Part 4. What happens when nobody wants dollars anymore? Now, what's terrifying for anyone living in the US or holding US dollars is how fast the dollar would lose its reserve currency status. The collapse won't be gradual. It will be sudden and devastating for the US. So, the dollar might collapse if China announces that all trade with BRICS countries will be conducted in a new digital currency. People across the world would rush to dump their reserves before they became worthless. Everything the US imports would become massively more expensive overnight. Gas prices could triple or quadruple as the US competes with other countries to buy energy using currency nobody wants. Your personal savings would be wiped out. If you have money in dollar-denominated accounts, those dollars would suddenly buy a fraction of what they did before. The stock market would crash as foreign investors pulled trillions out of the US assets. Your retirement account, your home value, and your entire net worth could disappear in weeks. The government's financial situation would become impossible. Why? Because the US runs a deficit of over $1 trillion per year. So other countries buy American bonds with their excess dollars. And if the demand declines, the government would face a brutal choice to print money and cause hyperinflation, or slash spending by 30% or more and trigger a depression. Not only this, but the interest rates would skyrocket as the Federal Reserve would desperately try to attract investment back to dollar assets. So anyone with variable rate debt would be crushed by payments they can't afford. Businesses would be unable to get affordable financing, causing mass layoffs and economic contraction. So, we can say that beyond the economic impact, the psychological destruction would be even worse, because America's entire identity as the world's superpower is built on dollar dominance. And when that ends, it would represent the most significant shift in global power since the fall of the Roman Empire, and it would be extremely horrifying if major countries agreed to abandon the dollar simultaneously. Just like China, Russia, and major oil producers that have already started conducting significant trade outside the dollar system, and trust me, it could trigger a cascade as other nations rush to protect themselves from holding devalued US currency. So eventually, the network effect that made the dollar powerful would work in reverse. Just as everyone wanted dollars because everyone else used dollars, they would desperately dump dollars if they saw others moving to alternatives, and it became like a bank run on the entire US financial system. Part 5. Stop relying on the dollar before it's too late. So what can you do to protect yourself from this incoming earthquake? You're not powerless, but you need to act right now while you still have options. First, get your wealth out of dollar-dominated assets immediately. Don't keep everything in US bank accounts, stocks, or government bonds. Start diversifying into international investments, foreign currencies, and assets that hold value regardless of what happens to the American economy. Physical gold and silver need to be your foundation. Throughout history, precious metals have preserved wealth during every currency crisis. Buy actual metal you can hold, not paper certificates that could become worthless when you need them most. Consider cryptocurrency strategically. Bitcoin and truly decentralized cryptocurrencies operate independently of any government, making them potential stores of value when traditional currencies fail. Just be prepared for aggressive government regulation attempts. Invest in physical commodities and commodity-producing companies, like oil, agricultural products, and industrial metals, which remain valuable regardless of which currency dominates trade. These companies often thrive during currency transitions. Don't wait until the crisis begins. By then, it's too late for meaningful protection at reasonable prices. Smart money is already moving out of dollars. The question is whether you'll join them or get caught holding worthless paper when the music stops. The collapse isn't some distant possibility. It's happening now, driven by countries representing over half the world's population. Your government won't warn you, and mainstream media won't help you prepare. It's up to you to protect your family's financial future. If this opened your eyes, share it with everyone who needs this information. The more people who understand and prepare, the better everyone's chances of survival. When the dollar dies, you want real assets and real skills, not paper promises from a broken government. Thanks for watching.